We're not there yet. Good morning. So the search begins for the clicker. I forgot about this again. Is it up here? All right. Ben, come to my rescue once again. Anyhow, well, we're taking a little bit of a jump into the future. So right now, this is the fifth Sunday, because since Jeff was out of town this week and fifth Sunday coming up and the young guys always do it, I said, well, I'll tell you what, Jeff, so you can actually, do some of your job. Why don't you preach then? So that I'll take for you now so you don't get 2 days off. So anyhow, so Jeff will be preaching fifth Sunday. So right now, yep, we're jumping forward to fifth Sunday. No, there's no meal afterwards. So sorry, once this sermon's over, then we're jumping back to present day. So today, I want to start off with asking questions. And a lot of people know I ask a lot of questions. I just asked my wife. I ask questions multiple times. And I preface it by saying question. And I know that's kind of redundant. But anywho, so I want to ask a couple questions for you today. All right. So what do you desire most right now? I want you just to really think hard right now. What do you desire most right now? And I'm thinking more of like worldly things, no cop-out answers, just like I want to go home to heaven, and that. No cop-out answers, okay? I'm thinking deep down, what are you after right now? What is that thing? Oh, I want that. And what are you working towards? Is it, some of the answers I thought about up here, is it more money? Is it a better job? Is it the newest and greatest electronic? Is it a bigger house? Anything like that, etc. And I want to think about that, okay? Okay, bam, it's magic. You have it. Congrats, you have it. Okay? Yeah, yes. That's wonderful. Follow-up question. Are you happy now? Now that you have that, are you happy? Figuratively, you have it. I really want to think about that. So this morning, I want to talk about when I first told Julie my title, When Is Enough Enough? She said, well, people are going to think this is a fire and brimstone one. When God says enough is enough, when is it going to be? But no, today I want to talk about contentment. When is enough enough? And I always like doing lessons that I also got to think myself on, because just ask my wife. This isn't a lesson, pounding down dreams and goals. We got to have dreams and goals, but on a weekly basis, I said, oh yeah, that would be a dream of mine. And usually it's prefaced by some type of tractor. That would be a dream of mine down the road, to have something like that. But anyhow, so I want us to think about contentment. And so when you have this thing that you've been working for, are you happy? Really, we got to think, if we got that, would we be happy, or is it just going to result in something else? Because we have that happiness, and for how long? And is just something else going to come up along the way? And the base of this lesson is going to be, we already have everything we need through Jesus, through the church, through Christ. And so we don't need anything else. Now, granted, yes, we need to continue to work towards goals and things and that. We can't just become complacent, and I'll get into that a little bit. I don't want to confuse contentment with complacency. I don't want to confuse those two, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we'll start with the scripture reading, and then we will go ahead and dive in.
Good morning. This morning's scripture comes from the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. Philippians 4, 11 through 13. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
All right. I'd like to thank Ben one more time. I was having computer issues up there, and he came to the rescue and that. So I asked him if he could arrest it and take it to jail first because it was being so incooperative, but he said no, that there wasn't a lockup for computers at the jail. So anyhow, and one more thing when I was thinking about contentment, I meant to say this. In your week, it doesn't get talked about a lot in news and that, but keeping your prayers out west, the ranches and farms out west, if you haven't heard not, the flooding and the snows and everything out there is just terrible. I've seen videos on Facebook and that where guys are literally going out and digging cattle out of the snowbanks alive, like they're digging down and finding them. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers this week as well. Anyhow, all right, so what is contentment? Well, it is defined as a state of happiness and satisfaction. Now, Is contentment, what is it? And my English major wife probably would disagree with me a little bit. Contentment is a noun. It's something that we, or a verb, or whatever it's called, but it's something we do, it's something we have. I'll hear about it later. And anyhow, you notice I'm not even looking in that direction. So anyhow, so it's something we have, it's something we do. So my other question is it inherited or is it learned? Is this something we just get? Is this something we just, they have very, parents that are very content in life right now, and so when they're born in that, the little one's going to grow up in contentment. No, it's nothing like that. It's something we learn, and it's something very hard to learn. I mean, because it's sometimes, and a lot of the times, it goes against what we're pushed at in society. Keep going, keep driving, keep getting more and more. You deserve more. You deserve this and that. But at some point, it's got to kind of just come to a stopping point. I mean, yeah, again, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't continue to try to get better in life, but sometimes it comes at some cost. And what cost is it going to be? Is it going to be family? Is it going to be friends? Is it going to be faith? When we're going after something, it can come with cost, so we have to keep that in check. So I want to use some examples, and it was a lot easier to find discontentment examples in the Bible than there is some contentment, for me at least. I did get some, there's multiple. But the first discontentment example I want to use is Adam and Eve, and that's pretty blatant right off the bat, isn't it? So Adam and Eve had everything. God gave them anything. Genesis 1:29 through 30. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and all the creatures that move along, and everything that has breath of life in it, I give you every green plant for food, and it was so. And Adam and Eve also were in control and took care of all the animals and that. So they had control of everything. They had everything they need. But that one thing, the tree. And they had to have it. Had to have it. And in Genesis 3:6 then, it talks about how it looked good. It was good for food, and it was, for gaining wisdom and that, and all these things, well, it looks good, and look, and that slowly creeping in, I got to have it, I got all this, but need a little bit more. And if they just would have stayed content with what they had, where would we be? So they had to go on and go after this. So even when people have so much, just if there's that one thing, we got to keep ourselves in check that we don't just, lose everything to get this one thing. Other example I thought of for contentment and read about then is the Israelites. And yeah, it's easy to say, but man, they grumbled an awful lot, didn't they? They weren't content very often. And so they were hungry in Exodus 16. They were hungry, they needed food. And God gave them manna in the morning, quail in the evening. And this is what they needed. They had bread, they had meat, going from, not having anything in their minds in that, to being so hungry, you should have left us die, in Egypt instead of bring us out here to die in the desert of starvation. But they're given manna and they're given quail. And God instructs them, go out and gather what you need according to each. Gather what you need. Don't gather in excess, because I don't want you to do that. Well, that didn't go over very well, because they went out and they did it. Some gathered a whole mess. Oh man, we got to keep this for morning, so we have more and more. Give me more. And in the morning they woke up, and what was bad with it? It was full of maggots, and it was just terrible. It was spoiled and full of maggots, and nobody wanted to eat that. And that angered God. And also talking about that is then God constructed them on the sixth day, go out now and gather twice as much, because the Sabbath, the seventh day, it's not going to fall, because it is the Sabbath. It is the day of rest. So yes, they gathered twice as much, but guess what some did on the seventh day? They were right out there waiting for it to fall from the sky and waiting to grab manna and to get quail. Why? Because they didn't follow God's instructions and they wanted more. They also were suffering from not being content. And give them a little bit, it's falling every day, but we just need to listen, and we're instructed. We have contentment. We have what we need. God will provide. We can do everything through him who strengthens me. but they wanted to go out and go get a little bit more. Now I want to talk about Solomon, and when I was listening to Bruce's class, he was starting to talk about Solomon. I was hoping he didn't, walk all over it in that. But Solomon, man, what a great guy. He just, asked for wisdom, and with the wise ruling, man, what a story. Man, this guy really has his stuff together, doesn't he? Well, for a little while. And so Solomon, in 1 Kings 3, he asked for wisdom. And this is great. This is he had wisdom to begin with to ask for this more wisdom. And because of this wisdom, this did please God. And this brought on, as Bruce talked about with the Queen of Sheba and that, others wanted to come and marvel at his wisdom. They wanted to marvel at his palace and everything he had been blessed with. And he was blessed by God, and he was using this for good purposes. But then whenever somebody would come visit Solomon, as is written in 1 Kings 3, and that's where it talks about wisdom, and then 10, 14 through 29, we start hearing about all his splendor. And then in 1 Kings 11, 1 through 13, we'll get to that, we hear about all his wives and that. When people would come ask for wisdom from Solomon, they'd always bring a gift. They'd bring something. It says that in 1 Kings. They'd bring something to give to him and that. So it just started getting more and more and more. As I read about that and read it, I just kind of could see, because I would have to keep myself in check. Well, hey, if I can attract this many people, to come and they give me stuff and that, I can see where that can be pretty appealing. So unfortunately, his gift of wisdom he got from God, he started abusing and using for the wrong reasons. And that started to anger God. And then, as I said in chapter 11, verse 1 through 13, we talk about Solomon with how many wives he had. That just so many headaches, but I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'll leave that alone. Anyhow, but then he started intermarrying with all these outside people, and this started back, way back when the Israelites were given Canaan, that they didn't wipe people out, and so Solomon started intermarrying with people, bringing their religion in, and then it just started corrupting, and more and more and more. Wasn't content with what he had to begin with. He had to have more. Saw somebody, had to have her, had to marry for some political reason or something, and had to have her. So he was getting more. It did not lead to contentment. It led to just always wanting more. And his wisdom was a great gift. So I want to stress that. Yes, that was a great gift, but he misused it. So it wasn't the wisdom that was bad. It was how he used it and how he let it just grow and grow to then turn to bad. So now I want to talk about some examples of contentment. Excuse me 1 second here. Anyhow, and right away Job jumped to mind. And in Job 1, 20 through 21, at this point, Job got up, tore his robe, and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." This was after the first round, where Satan, took everything away from him. Then in Job chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, after then all the sores and everything, his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. We shall accept good from God. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. So, okay, got to get things in order here. And maybe they just disappeared. Oh, well, that page is gone. Anyhow, so Job, he loses everything, and yet he maintains faithful. Now, if it was me and I lost everything, kids and that, and just, having multiple kids and everything and that, I can't imagine that. I just can't imagine that whatsoever. And yet he stays content. He knows what he has. He has life and that. He knows he's been blessed so. And he continued to praise his God. And that's a great example of contentment, because he doesn't let it get him down. And then he gets the sores. Everything attacks his body, and then his physical body, starts deteriorating that. And he stays content. And that's a real good example where, and keep myself in check with this, where things just seem to be going downhill, downhill, downhill. We're blessed to have the Lord. We're blessed to have each other. We're blessed to have the church and that. We got all we need, and we just need to reflect on that and know that that is still there. An example was a couple examples I read about in a little study about this and that. A couple real good examples. The one, they contributed the physical things of the world as cotton candy. Who's had cotton candy? We've all had cotton candy. Yeah. I think I read on Facebook, Grayson got some at the Ice Hogs game last night. Yeah, cotton candy. And oh man, I loved getting cotton candy at the fair. And you get this, and man, it's so cheap because you get this huge bag. Man, that's so much food for so little money. And you grab out a little pinch of it and that, and oh, it looks so good. And you put it on the tongue, and it tastes so good. But guess what? Just like it's gone. But then what does it do? Oh, I want more. I gotta get a little bit more. And just like that, it's gone. And I thought that was a real good analogy with kind of physical things in that, where yeah, it's great. It looks so wonderful in that, but you get it, and yeah, it tastes sweet, but just for that split second, and it's gone. But then it's gonna leave you wanting more. Also, an example was that a guy came in and gets some advice from a minister or from a counselor or something, and he said, I've lost everything financially. And the minister asked him, well, have you lost your family? No, I said I lost everything financially. Have you lost your faith? No, I said I lost everything financially. And he went on and on with questions, and in the end, he said, to me, you haven't lost the important things, so why are you so upset with this? I mean, we're content to have the basics. We're content to have the Lord, just as Job, and we need to use that as an example. Another example I thought about is Ruth, and not as much meat in this part of it, but Ruth was very content as well. Very humble woman, she also, her future did not look too good. For those, I'm sure many know, but Ruth was the daughter-in-law to Naomi. Naomi's husband died, and then Naomi's two sons, one of which a husband to Ruth, they also died. So with no working men in the family, it was basically they were going to be in poverty. They were going to go to the streets and be beggars. But so the mother-in-law Naomi told both daughter-in-laws, go back to your tribes, go back to home where you will have a future in that. The one did. Ruth said, no, I will stay with you. You are my family now. She was content with her family. She refused to leave and stayed with Naomi. So then they traveled. They come to fields, and they happen to be the fields of Boaz, who's family of Naomi. And did Ruth walk into the field after finding out who owned the field, and I'd be like, well, I'm family. I can just come up here and do whatever I want. No, she stayed content with having the ability to stay behind all the men and women that were threshing and going through the field. She stayed behind to just pick what was left over. She was content with getting what she got behind everybody else. And a good side of the story then, her contentment led to her life being blessed. She ended up marrying Boaz and that, and just then her life and Naomi's life, turned out to be very good for her because she was blessed for her contentment, for being, such a content person and being a humble person. Paul now, and this is our scripture reading this morning, and another great example of just a content guy. And he remained faithful to God through many hardships. We know them all: shipwreck, jail, beaten, disease, everything. He just stayed loyal. He stayed content because he knew he was serving the Lord and doing the right thing. He knew he had the Lord. Philippians 4:11 through 13. Read it one more time. Ben did such a great job, but I'll read it one more time. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And I want to stop there on verse 12 there. I know what it is to have plenty. And I didn't really think about this too much when I was doing this, and I've seen this before, but I thought about this. Paul had an awful lot. He was high up there in the rankings before he became an apostle. He had a lot. He knew what it was like to be in the fancy places and have the fancy clothes and everything and that because of his upbringing, because of his learning and where he was headed, in life. He was headed to live a pretty, cushy life. But then he found the Lord, and he was content with staying with the Lord and doing the right thing. He was content with taking what was given to him, content with doing what he needed to do. And I thought about that, and going from somebody that knew what it was like to have everything and to have this splendor and be knocked down again, just very similar to Job, really kind of was awe-inspiring too, that he was able to just stay content with that. We don't see him asking God for more. He says, I have what I have. I'm content with that. He's content with his life, and he's content for doing good for God. And that's very important. That's the end of my examples, and I want to, though, just hit one more thing, and I talked about it a little bit. I want you to, take this to heart and think about this stuff. I mean, myself, too, got to keep this in check. But I want to take and I want to throw everything out the window I ever said today. Because we can't be content in our growth in the church. We can't be content with our study and with, going out in the world. That we have to have a hunger for. So I kind of thought of, when I was thinking about this, I thought about the wording of, is it something we need to have, or is it something we want to have? We want to grow the church. We want to continue growth in our spiritual development. Yeah, we need to too, but we want that. That should be an absolute want or that. And again, talking about not pushing down goals or that, we need to want to, extend, better our life and do things in that. But when it becomes an absolute need, and if I don't get it, I'm not going to be happy, that's then when we're going to have trouble, and we have to be careful, and, we're kind of in the dangers of being discontent. We've been blessed. We've been blessed very well. We have a great church family. We have the Lord, and we have the promise of eternal life with God and Jesus. So what more do we really need? I want to leave you with this verse. 1 Timothy 6:6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. I hope I'm not robbing a one-word lesson from Jeff using contentment, but I just thought that this word, and we always got to keep it in check, and I got to keep it in check all the time. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And I hope that sticks. I know that verse is just going to stick with me for a while, because it means a lot, and it says it all right there. We've been blessed, like I said, and we'll continue to be blessed, and we need to continue to stay content. Keep working hard. We got to work hard to support our families and support ourselves. I'm not taking that away. But be content, and don't let your discontent push down the important things in life. This morning, if you have any needs, if any prayers of the church or anything like that, we'd love to sit down with you and pray for you, and need any study in that, we're more than happy to do that with you as well. So, at this time, please let it be known as we stand and as we sing.